Welcome to Move the Chains with Jonathan Rivers. Here's your host, Jonathan Rivers.
Let there be football. Welcome to Move the Chains. I'm your host, Jonathan Bam Rivers. Championship Sunday's here. I'm excited about it. I'm going to break down the NFC and AFC Championship games, and I'm going to tell you who's going to be facing off in New Orleans in a few weeks for the Super Bowl. And the second down, it's never too early to look at 2025 in college football, so I'll give you my early thoughts and what I think teams should be looking forward to, or in some cases not looking forward to, as the season approaches within the next 10 to 12 months. And also on my nonsense narrative, there's an offensive coordinator that was on the team this season in the NFL that is now the new head coach of a division rival. And a lot of people are assuming because of the side of the ball in which he coaches and because of what that team has, that's exactly what they need to get out of where they are. And I just don't think that's guaranteed, and I'll tell you why. And last but not least, man, there's talent in a lot of places in the NFL, but the one thing you have to realize is that talent has not and will not ever guarantee titles, especially in the NFL. All that and more here on Move the Chains, but you know how we do it. Let's kick it off at first down. All right, Championship Sunday. So before I break down the NFC and AFC Championship games and tell you who I think will be facing each other in the Super Bowl, I want to tell you, first of all, you have to understand how football is won. It has to be a complementary game. You watched the Lions lose to the Commanders last weekend because the Lions were not complementary. And in my estimation, 75% of the participants, being the Chiefs, the Bills, and also the Eagles, play complementary football. They're teams that understand what it takes to win football games, and they don't have to be flashy. Now, the results they get may end up in big plays and high-scoring opportunities, but they're very, very understanding of what it takes to be in a football game for 4 quarters. And I think if you understand this as a fan moving forward, you'll see the landscape of football changing into why teams are winning, because they're not necessarily worried about the flash, they're more worried about the substance, which is why I'm so excited about these games. So let's start with the NFC Championship game and breaking down those same Commanders who will be going on the road and facing the NFC East champ, Philadelphia Eagles. Now, nobody's unaware of the fact that these are division rivals. We understand that this will be the third time these teams are playing each other this year, and these teams have split with one another. But let me dive in a little bit deeper to these teams, specifically these quarterbacks, before I actually get into the game. Jayden Daniels is a phenom. But why is he a phenom? I want you to think back to Arizona State. We all know that Jayden Daniels started over 55 games in college. I think he was 38 and 17 or something like that in college. Do you know that in 5 seasons in college he threw 20 interceptions? 5 years of college football, he threw 20 picks. That should tell you how he takes care of the football, and it's permeating itself into the season this year as a rookie. And Josiah, my producer, and I had a conversation about Jayden Daniels before the show, and this was great that Josiah brought this up because I had seen the article but didn't read it in its totality. Jayden Daniels was very adamant about teams providing virtual reality for him during the draft process. Because of the savant that he is, he likes to use virtual reality to try to get mental reps and slow the game down. And then he speeds it up. He puts it on an even harder section, an even harder level, and it allows him to understand that when I'm on the field, what I do methodically and what I do regarding my brain and how I look at things slows the game down for me. So this can easily translate to why Jayden Daniels is so cool, calm, and collected when he's on the field. He's that type of quarterback that doesn't let anything rattle him, and it comes from his preparation. So while everybody laughed at Kyler Murray for having to put in his contract for the Cardinals that he couldn't play X amount of video games, I understand that if the Cardinals felt that video games were detrimental to him. See, Jayden Daniels is the perfect example of why the user dictates how the tool being used is to your benefit or to your detriment. And when I look at Jalen Hurts, I've said this on the show before, and I'm going to say it again. Has he become one of the most underrated players in the NFL? I mean, he helped lead the Eagles to the Super Bowl 2 years ago, and they lost to Patrick Mahomes, and we understand how great he was, and he did fumble in that Super Bowl. But then last year, everybody was like, oh, we understand the problems with the Eagles. They had new coordinators, and Jalen Hurts just doesn't look like himself. He's turned the ball over more, which he did, and that's understandable. But Jalen Hurts also go back to what he did in college, starting as a freshman at the University of Alabama, something that had never been done. Winning freshman of the year, being a national champion, then going on to Oklahoma and having a phenomenal season under Lincoln Riley. Jalen Hurts has always been a leader and is a son of a coach. And if the Eagles win this game, which I think they will, and I'll tell you why in a little bit, this will be his second Super Bowl appearance in 3 years with 3 different coordinators in 3 consecutive seasons. So for all of the excuses people make for Justin Herbert and his coaching and all the excuses people make for Trevor Lawrence and the coaching he had when he first came into the league, Jalen Hurts has dealt with 3 different coordinators and may end up in the Super Bowl 2 out of the last 3 seasons and in the playoffs all 3 seasons. To the game. Philadelphia is a well-balanced football team. The defense of this team can't get talked about enough, and I say that because I want people to understand how young this defense is. And when you're young, as a defense, it's so much easier for you to make mistakes. Remember, you didn't play with a lot of these guys the year before because a lot of times you either came from college or if you're a guy like Zach Bond, you weren't on the team the year before. So this is a conglomerate of new talent, and it's fused perfectly. And I think a lot of that has to go to Vic Fangio, the defensive coordinator, who's been a stalwart in this league on being able to develop defensive talent and put a scheme in that highlights their benefits. I think Philadelphia is a team that all around is better than Washington. I'll say it like I said it last week. I'm picking Philadelphia to win this game, but please make no mistake that I am a firm believer in Jane Daniels. I am a firm believer in what Dan Quinn and Jane Daniels are doing with this team, and this team from an ownership standpoint down to the players. I think the acquisition of Bobby Wagner was huge because he is the Jane Daniels of that defense. He just happens to be a veteran. But I think Philadelphia is a well-balanced, a well-oiled machine at the end of the day. They have one of the best offensive lines in football, and they can run the ball with a dynamic runner. If they didn't have a runner as dynamic as Saquon, I think they'd still be very good. It just makes them even better. So Philadelphia beats the Commanders at home to take the season series and end up in the Super Bowl for the second time in the past 3 seasons. All right, the AFC Championship game. Bills traveling to Kansas City. First of all, the fact that Buffalo ended up 13-4 and was the 2 seed, to me speaks volumes about Buffalo and Kansas City. Because there are a lot of times if you're a 13-4 team, and Buffalo would have played their starters if they had a 1 seed to play for in the final regular season game, in my estimation, could have easily had 14 wins. And remember, one of those wins was against Kansas City. So both of these teams were undefeated at home this year. But because the Chiefs did what they needed to and become the number 1 seed, they get the home field advantage. So I was asked earlier, what do you think Buffalo needs to do to win this game against Kansas City? And I said that I feel like Buffalo and Kansas City are mirror images of one another now. Colin Cowherd said this at the beginning of the week on one of his shows, and I completely agree with him because I've been saying it. The one reason Kansas City is so good because they can out Floyd Mayweather anybody. They know just enough about how to move and jab and move and not take big shots and hit you just enough times to beat you. Buffalo has now graduated to that. Right? Because you're not worried about Josh Allen putting up 300 yards. Do you know both of these quarterbacks, if I'm not mistaken, threw for less than 200 yards in the divisional round and both won? It shows you what the formula is. But I said in order for Buffalo to win this game, I think they're going to have to actually get out of what they've been doing so well all season. They'll have to make big plays. And I think that's where you may see them make a mistake before Kansas City. Because make no mistake about it, I think the team who loses the turnover battle in no way in my estimation can win this game. If I'm wrong, I'll stand on that. But whoever wins the turnover battle wins this game. And I think when you combine Kansas City being at home, having Patrick Mahomes, having Travis Kelce do what he does in the postseason, and also, again, I don't know why nobody wants to really understand how phenomenal the Chiefs have been in changing their stripes and still winning. This is a defense-first team. And I'll say that even with the greatest quarterback on the planet in Patrick Mahomes. He is the ultimate closer, and they have a top 3 defense. One of the best rushing defenses as well. And oh, by the way, Jalen Watson is back. I think Kansas City, because of guys like DeAndre Hopkins, who wasn't on the team last year, because of guys like Hollywood Brown, who wasn't on the team last year, are able to make enough plays offensively, and Kansas City is able to close out Buffalo's magical run, and Kansas City will be en route to trying to win their 3rd straight Super Bowl, something that's never happened in NFL history. All right, when we come back from the break, I'll give you my early thoughts on the college football season 2025. You don't want to miss it. Stay tuned for more Move the Chains right after this. Welcome back to Move the Chains. Before I get to second down, I want to take this opportunity, as always, to thank my Lord and Savior, Jesus Christ, for the opportunity to host Move the Chains. Secondly, I want to thank you, the fans, for watching the show, whether you're watching on YouTube, whether you're watching it here on Fox 54. The feedback has been phenomenal. Thank you for being a growing community that has really latched on to this mission. And last but not least, the best production crew in the business. Man, some of the conversations and feedback that I get from my producers and my directors and my YouTube team are phenomenal. I couldn't do it without them. So thank you, and shout out to the best production crew in the business here on Move the Chains. Having said all that, you know what time it is. It's time for second down. All right, it's never too early to look at 2025 in my estimation when it comes to college football. First off, shout out to Ohio State, Ryan Day, and everybody for winning the national championship. And that's kind of where I want to make sure that we understand that college football, remember, now you're still in the recruiting. You're still trying to close deals. You're still trying to get people through the portal. You're still trying to make sure you get the last bit of high school players in to build your team for next year. So coaching in college football is never done, and neither is move the chains here regarding college football. So let's look at the first thing I want to take a look at here. UGA is the new Alabama. And why does this thought come to mind? Well, because if you're Georgia, you're about at 800-something winning percentage since 2021. I had the numbers, and I don't remember them exactly, but Georgia's won about 50 games the last 4 years, and have only lost like 4 or 5. Combine that with 2 national championships, an SEC championship, and 2 berths in the college football playoff, it sort of tells me that people are now holding them to a higher standard. And I know this has never been more evident than me reading some articles about how Georgia fans are so upset that they didn't finish in the AP top 5 this year. I think they finished number 6. When you finish in the top 6 and people feel that as a disappointment, you now graduated into a stratosphere unknown by many programs. And remember, there were always exaggerations to the demise of Alabama under Nick Saban when they didn't win a national title. Not because they didn't make the SEC championship game, not because they didn't make the college football playoff, because they didn't make a title. So nobody cares that Georgia's going to be losing phenomenal guys like Mikael Williams on their defense and maybe Small Munden. Nobody cares that Carson Beck's transferring to Miami, right? Nobody cares that this past season they lost Dale McGee and Fran Brown, 2 of their best assistants and recruiters, to become head coaches at Georgia State and Syracuse, respectively. Nobody cares. And Kirby Smart doesn't care either. This is not me making excuses for Georgia. This is me saying congratulations that you're now a prisoner of your own success. You've done so much in the Kirby Smart era, specifically the last 4 years, that the standard is now the standard, as Mike Tomlin would say it in Pittsburgh. That's where the program is at Georgia. I don't think they'd have it any other way. All right, what's my next thought that I want to go into here? Ohio State can't take a step back. And so I guess taking a step back can mean a lot of different things to a lot of different people. But first, let me answer why I say they can't take a step back. Well, one, because Ohio State is one of those programs that will never be void of resources. Everybody understands that they had the most NIL money that they were able to spend on their team this year, and I'll still congratulate them because that was the same argument people would make about teams 10 years, 15 years ago, where the only reason they're good is because they recruited at a high level. Well, you still have to coach. You still have to get those players to play together, and that's even more evident now with new players via the transfer portal and also coming out of high school. Ohio State can't take a step back because it doesn't matter that they're going to be losing guys like, Cody Simon, or they're going to be losing Jack Sawyer, or we don't know if Quinshon Junkins is coming back, or Will Howard. We know that Travion Henderson's probably going to the league, and Emeka Ibuka's gone. All of these talented players will be leaving, but you still got a roster of horses that are coming back and coming in. They've got one of the best recruiting classes in the nation. And the real reason I say they can't take a step back is because I don't care that Ryan Day just won a national championship. I care, meaning I don't care because I know how Ohio State fans are. I know that they're still going to point to the 1-4 record against Michigan, even though Jim Harbaugh in 9 seasons was 3-5 against Ohio State, but had a great record against everybody else. I'm just saying there's so many similarities there, and Ryan Day won a national title in less time than it took Jim Harbaugh to win one. So Ryan Day should have the world at his fingertips in Columbus, Ohio. But I guarantee you, if he comes out and loses a game to Penn State at home next year, or goes on the road the final game of the season and loses to Michigan, or even if they lose the beginning game of the season to a team in Texas, even though that can completely be warranted, you're going to hear rumblings about Ryan Day having to get out of there even though he won a national championship game. All right, and the final thought I want to make, college football transparency and changes. I just want to make sure that you can tell me, if you're the college football playoff committee, what it is that we should be looking at. Give me a criteria. Give me some semblance of what we should understand going in so we're not surprised. Because we can disagree with your teams that you're putting in all day long, but if you're telling me I value this, these are the 4 or 5 criteria that we're going to stand by no matter what when it comes to college football, then you take out so much of the ambiguity and you take out a lot of the subjectivity in my estimation. Now, a lot of it has to be subjective because you can't quantify teams all the time based on what you see in games. But, man, just make sure, one, you change the seating, and just give me a criteria that everybody can understand and sink their teeth into. And then it'll be on us to accept it or not accept it. All right, when we come back from the break, it'll be my nonsense narrative. You don't want to miss it. Back when we move the chains right after this. Welcome back into the show, and it's time for my favorite segment of the show, So you know what that means. It's time for my nonsense narrative. Ben Johnson, one of the hottest names in the NFL right now, who's the former offensive coordinator of the Lions. You notice I said former, and that's because he's the new head coach of the Chicago Bears, the division rival. And the only thing I'll say about Ben Johnson, one, I'm not going to sit here and tell you that Ben Johnson will be a great coach. I'm not going to sit here and tell you Ben Johnson will be a terrible coach. I'm sitting here telling you that because Ben Johnson has been a phenomenal offensive coordinator for the Lions doesn't equal becoming a great head coach. Because Aaron Glenn also got hired as a coach for the New York Jets, who was the defensive coordinator for the Lions, and I'd say the same thing there. But specific to Ben Johnson, I think we live in an age where people love to watch SportsCenter because it's full of highlights. And people love to see diving catches, people love to see 100-yard kickoff returns, people love to see interceptions for touchdowns, and I get all that. It's a part of the game. I'm not dismissing that because I have a student and a savant when it comes to this game. What I will say is, please don't discount culture, and please don't discount that being an offensive coordinator and then being the manager of an entire organization and a team on game day are completely different roles. And what if Ben Johnson decides not to call the offensive plays in Chicago? Well, that means the offense likely won't look like it did when he was in Detroit. So the only thing I'll tell everybody is, yes, he's a phenomenal offensive mind, and yes, he may be the right fit for this team, and by proxy, Caleb Williams. But to hire a head coach simply to appease a quarterback and to make sure your quarterback grows, it's not the case. See Dan Quinn in Washington with Jane Daniels, and see DeMeco Ryans in Houston with C.J. Stroud. You don't have to have offensive-minded head coaches to produce an offensive-minded team. All right, when we come back from the break, it'll be the final segment of the show. Back on Move the Chains right after this. Welcome back to Move the Chains, and it's the final segment of the show, so that means it's time for the final drive. Man, Joe Burrow, Lamar Jackson, Josh Allen, Jalen Hurts, supremely talented individuals, and I'm just sticking to the quarterback position because they're the most important positions on the field. They are supremely talented, but the problem everybody makes in my estimation is that they assume talent equals a title. Well, they're so talented they deserve to win a championship. No, you don't. The NFL is not in the deserve business, it is in the earn business. And as talented as you are, if you haven't earned the right by your team putting you in the best position, you putting yourself in the best position to be successful and to win that championship, it will definitely elude you throughout your career. All right, don't forget, you can not only watch Move the Chains right here on the Sports Leader WXTX Fox 54, but you can also catch us on YouTube. Make sure you go to YouTube. It's @move_the_chains is the channel. Subscribe, like, leave a comment. We're here for all of it. Hey, Championship Sunday. Enjoy the games tomorrow, man, and we're here to talk about them next week. For the best production crew in the business, I'm your boy, Jonathan Bam Rivers, and as always, right here on Move the Chains. Until next time, God bless.